Who is piloting the UAPs or UFOs constantly seen in our skies? Where are they from? Why are they here? How long have they been here? What is their mission on planet Earth? Do they come in peace or do they have more sinister motives? Join your host, Mad Mark, as he uncovers the answers to these questions and many more of the mysteries that have puzzled mankind for centuries on Who Are the Aliens? The history of the Anunnaki on planet Earth. And now, here's Mad Mark. Today's episode, The Creation of Man. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of Who Are the Aliens? The history of the Anunnaki on planet Earth. I'm Mad Mark, and today we will resume our studies of Zecharia Sitchin's first book, The 12th Planet, published by Stein and Day in 1976. Today we continue with Chapter 11. When we left off with Episode 4, the mutiny of the Anunnaki workers was in full swing, and things were getting tense for Enlil. The Sumerian texts tell us that the 7 great Anunnaki were making the lesser gods suffer the toil. The Anunnaki working class had basically done all the hard labor since they first arrived on Earth, but mining for gold was the one toil that they hated the most. And they'd been doing it for a very long time. For over 11 shars, or 400,000 years, these workers had been doing this back-breaking task. And they were getting very tired of it. So Enlil, the supreme commander of the Anunnaki operations on Earth, had scheduled a routine trip from his base in Sumeria down to South Africa to inspect the mining operations, of which his brother Enki was in charge. And the workers saw that as a golden, pardon my pun, opportunity to put their mutiny into action. In the middle of the night, the workers set fire to their mining tools and then proceeded to the home where Enlil was staying and surrounded it. Enlil's first reaction was to do battle with the workers, but since he was greatly outnumbered, his chancellor Nusku advised him that it might be better to alert Enki of the situation and send an emergency message to Anu requesting that he come down to Earth to intervene. Soon, Enki and a couple of other Anunnaki leaders arrived. The texts do not name these other leaders, but I am assuming that they were also members of the 7 great Anunnaki. Thus, an emergency meeting is convened. Anu is not yet present, but is monitoring the meeting through some sort of technology, possibly something similar to what we use today to meet with people outside of our own state or country. And Enlil is furious. "Is it against me that this is being done?" he questioned. "Must I engage in hostilities?" Attempting to let cooler heads prevail, Anu suggests that an inquiry be taken into the grievances of the workers. So, under the authority of Anu and the other commanders, Enlil's chancellor Nusku is sent out to the gate to listen to the workers and gather more information. But when he requests to speak to the leader, all of the workers respond in unison. "Every single one of us has declared war. Excessive toil is killing us. Our work has been heavy with much distress."
Oh, bitch, bitch, bitch.
Nusku files his report with the Anunnaki commanders, and once again, Enlil is enraged, and he begins calling for executions. By this time, Anu has finally arrived on the scene, and he surprisingly takes sides with the workers. "What are we accusing them of?" he asks. "Their work was heavy. Their distress was much. Every day their lamentation was heavy. We could hear the complaints." Enki backs up his father's words, but then announces that he has a solution to their problem. "Let a primitive worker be created," Enki goes on to say. "While the birth goddess is present, let her create a primitive worker. Let him bear the yoke. Let him carry the toil of the gods." Now, this was a very long and complicated process that we will be covering in great detail down the road. For instance, in the book, Mr. Sitchin states that the suggestion that a primitive worker be created so that he could take over the burden of work for the Anunnaki was readily accepted. Unanimously, the gods voted to create the worker, and man shall be his name. First of all, when Enki first suggested this, there was much dissent in the ranks of the Anunnaki, especially from Enlil. Eventually, they all agreed, yes, but not before many debates and disagreements. Also, the actual process of creating man was long and dubious, and I promise you that both of these points will be covered in much detail down the road. Another thing that I wish to mention here is that, as I've said before, each Anunnaki went by different names at the various different points in time. In an effort to prevent confusion for both myself and all of you, I prefer to lock into just one name for each Anunnaki. In a past episode, I briefly mentioned Ninhursag, a sister of Enlil and a consort of Enki's. At this point in the texts, she is referred to as Mami. So if you're reading along, Mami is Ninhursag. But for now, let's return to the book. According to the Sumerian texts, they summoned and asked the goddess, the midwife of the gods, the wise Ninhursag, "You are the birth goddess. Create workers. Create a primitive worker that he may bear the yoke. Let him bear the yoke assigned by Enlil. Let the worker carry the toil of the gods." Ninhursag then commented that she would need the assistance of Enki, with whom skill lies. Now, at this point in the book, something that took many years is glossed over as if it was performed in a day. It was not. Just please understand that I will return to this topic again on a future episode. I don't want you to think that I'm glossing over something this important. But obviously, in an effort to save time, the book quickly blows past all the work and trial and error involved in this process and simply skips to the point where man is actually created. Then Ninhursag shouted in triumph, "I have created man. My hands have made it." She then summons the rest of the Anunnaki and continues, "You commanded me a task. I have completed it. I have removed your heavy work. I have imposed your toil on the worker man. You raised your cry for a worker kind. I have loosed the yoke. I have provided your freedom." The Anunnaki received her announcement enthusiastically.
Excellent! Excellent!
And there you have it. The Anunnaki arrived on Earth, set up their colonies and various operations, and had now created their own brand of slavery. Not with slaves imported from another continent, but with workers that they created themselves. The mutiny of the gods had led to the creation of mankind. Wow, that's a lot to digest. And I've never actually completely come to terms with how I feel about that. How do you feel about it? Please leave a comment and let me know. As far as I'm concerned, on one hand, we wouldn't be who and where we are today technologically if the Anunnaki had not done what they did, spliced their DNA with the hominid that was on Earth at that time to create us. I mean, I can see how they did it. They were more technologically advanced then than we are now, and we could do it. But was it the right thing to do? And I must admit that I do not like the way it feels knowing that we were created to be slaves. I have always been against slavery in any form. It's just plain wrong. And another question is it still going on today? Are we still slaves? Many people working jobs that they don't necessarily care for just to pay the bills often comment that they feel like slaves, that the global elite have everything and that the rest of us are simply slaving for whatever crumbs they decide to toss our way. Is this slavery still going on? One thing that Mr. Sitchin did not cover yet at this point is the fact that the Anunnaki inserted a slave worker gene into us at the time of our creation. I will cover that topic on a future episode. But you and I have all encountered people in our lives who seem happiest when they are working their asses off, or feel that a person has to work their ass off in order to just get ahead. Was that a part of our programming? One can easily understand why the original authors of the Bible, or in other words, the Jewish Torah, found it necessary to sugarcoat all of this. Genesis chapter 2, verses 4 through 25, makes our creation all seem so pleasant and loving. Slavery is not mentioned at all. And the only time we see the word work is in verse 15, where we read that the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. One footnote to all of this is that the Garden of Eden was actually called the Eden, E-D-I-N, and it was not at all what we read about in the Bible. But that's a story for a future episode. But that description in the Bible is far more desirable than, "I have removed your heavy work. I have imposed your toil on the worker man. You raised your cry for a worker kind. I have loosed the yoke. I have provided your freedom." So, once again, I ask, because not only do I feel a strong desire to talk about this, the fact that we were created as a slave race, but I'm sure that many of you probably feel the same way after hearing all this. So please leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts about this topic. I would be very interested to hear what you have to say. This may even be a topic that I end up devoting an entire show to down the road, where I read your comments and respond. But for now, let's return to the book. Now, at first glance, this creation story appears to be at odds with both the theory of evolution and the Judeo-Christian account as found in the Bible. But Mr. Sitchin claims that this information contained in the Sumerian texts can not only confirm both accounts, but he also claims that there is really no conflict at all between the two. Well, unless, of course, you can overlook the fact that they conveniently left out the part about us being slaves. Anyway, the Sumerian texts often referred to man as both created by the gods and as a link in the evolutionary chain that all began in their epic of creation. They knew of and wrote about a time before man, when only the Anunnaki were on Earth. They also say that when the Anunnaki first arrived here, the arts of grain cultivation, fruit planting, and raising cattle were not yet present here, which the biblical book of Genesis also references. No plant of the cleared field was yet on earth. No herb that is planted had yet been grown, and man was not yet there to work the soil. Then, as we have already shown, the Anunnaki created man to do their work. The terms used by the Sumerians and the Akkadians referring to early man gives us a clue as to his purpose. He was Lulu, meaning primitive. He was Lulu Amilu, meaning primitive worker. And he was Awilam, meaning laborer. And the fact that man had been created to be servants to the gods didn't strike the Sumerians as odd either. In biblical times, deities were often referred to with terms such as Lord, Sovereign, King, Ruler, and Master. And the word Avad, which was commonly mistranslated, here we go again, to the word worship, actually means work. Both ancient and biblical men did not worship their gods, they worked for them. Just like in the Sumerian accounts, no sooner had the biblical God created man than he planted a garden and assigned him to work there. It states, "And the Lord God took the man that he had created and placed him in the Garden of Eden to till it and to tend to it." So God did not create man to be his buddy or his friend. There was no sitting in front of the TV watching the NFL and pounding brewskis.
Hey, bud, let's party.
Nope, there was none of that. He created man, he plopped him down in the garden, and he told him, "Get your ass to work." Again, the question arises, why? What would an all-knowing, all-seeing creator of the universe possibly need with a slave to tend his garden for him? It literally makes no sense. But beings from another planet who came to Earth to mine gold, beings who were forced to do the hard labor themselves for literally thousands of years and who finally revolted, yes, those beings would have definitely been in the market for some slaves. In the Bible, God is later described as strolling in the garden in the breeze of the day, enjoying himself on a leisurely walk because he now had a man to tend his garden for him. As if the creator of the universe couldn't have simply waved his hand over the garden and made it perfect without the help of a man. Far more logical is the Sumerian version, where these gods are all clamoring for human workers so that they could rest and relax. In the Sumerian version of this event, we learn that the decision to create man was adopted by the gods in their assembly, whereas in Genesis, the term Elohim, which translates to the plural deities, is again used instead of the word God, and we read that, "And Elohim said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Again, we have to ask, who was this deity talking to? Did he suffer from multiple personality disorder?
Are you mental?
The Bible doesn't provide an answer. This is identical to the incident at the Tower of Babel, which I referenced in episode 2, where God is again talking to other deities who we're just supposed to believe aren't really there, when he claims, "Come, let us go down and confound their language so that they may not understand each other's speech." Likewise, also in the Genesis creation story, when Adam and Eve eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge, which is another ridiculous incident that I will cover in more detail on a later episode, we read that Elohim issued a warning to these same unknown deities that, "Behold, man has become like one of us, to know good and evil." I think the answer here is quite obvious. The biblical accounts were passed down from their original Sumerian origins. And for reasons that I will address on a future episode, the creators of the Bible condensed the original many gods down to just one supreme deity. The biblical tale is nothing more than an edited version of the Sumerian story of the discussions in the assembly of the gods. And the Old Testament took great pains to make sure that everyone understood that man was neither a god nor from the heavens. It clearly states that the heavens are the heavens of the Lord. Unto mankind earth he hath given. This new creation, man, was referred to as the Adam, because he was created from the Adama, or earth soil. In other words, the earthling. He lacked the knowledge of the gods and lived a much shorter lifespan. But in all other respects, man was very similar to the gods, physically and emotionally, internally and externally. In all the ancient pictorial depictions of gods and men, the physical likeness is evident. Although the biblical condemnation against worshiping pagan gods gave rise to the belief that God had neither an image nor a likeness. Although not only the Genesis tale, but there are many other biblical reports that tell a different story. The God of the ancient Hebrews could be seen. He could be wrestled with, heard, and spoken to. He had a head, feet, hands, and fingers, as well as a waist. The biblical God, as well as his emissaries, looked and acted like men because men were created to look and act like the gods. But therein lies the mystery. How could this new creation be an almost physical, mental, and emotional replica of the Anunnaki? How exactly was man created? Now, here in the Western world, it has largely been accepted that man was deliberately created by God to have dominion over everything on earth. But then, in 1859, Charles Darwin published his Origin of Species, suggesting that evolution and natural selection was the reason for our existence here. And let's remember that the Christian world had been rocked even earlier, in 1788 to be exact, when several noted geologists had begun to suggest that the Earth was much older than the 5,500-year Hebrew calendar. But Darwin's shattering findings, concluding that all living things, including man, were the products of evolution and not generated spontaneously. Now, of course, the reaction of the church at that time was very violent, as you would expect. But as the scientific evidence continued to pile up in defense of this theory, the church's criticism was reduced. But evolution cannot account for the sudden appearance of Homo sapiens. Again, where is that damn missing link?
What are you people? On dope?
As we've discussed before, Homo sapiens appeared virtually overnight in terms of the millions of years that evolution would have required. We are the product of some sudden revolutionary event, appearing just 300,000 years ago, which was millions of years too soon. The scholars and scientists may have no answers to this, but I do, because the ancient Sumerian texts do. Homo sapiens, modern man, was created by the ancient gods, or the Anunnaki. When Enki was first enlisted to create the Adamu, or the first man, the ancient texts tell us that he replied, "The creature we need, it already exists, and I will bind upon it the image of the gods." Here, then, is the answer to the puzzle. The Anunnaki didn't create Homo sapiens out of nothing. They simply took an existing creature here on Earth and manipulated it, combining their DNA with these early hominids to create us. So let's take a trip back in time now and try to imagine what it was like as all of these events unfolded. Earth's great interglacial stage, which began roughly 435,000 years ago, and the resulting warmer climate brought about a proliferation of food and animals. And it also sped up the appearance and the spread of the advanced man-like apes known as Homo erectus. You can almost picture in your mind roaming bands of these curious creatures being lured towards the encampments of the Anunnaki by the sight of these huge rockets landing and taking off. And it's not out of the question that the Anunnaki were observing them as well. Perhaps a few of these creatures were even captured for study and research purposes. There are several ancient cylinder seals which depict these ape men living among the other animals. So the Anunnaki were very aware of the existence of Homo erectus, and then, after the uprising of the Anunnaki working class, when a need for manual labor arose, it's no wonder that Enki immediately suggested that the creature we need, it already exists. But Homo erectus was not exactly what the Anunnaki needed. No, this creature was going to need an upgrade. They were still very wild and would have been difficult to domesticate. Also, their bodies weren't exactly fit for the job. They needed to be able to use and grasp the many tools of the Anunnaki. And they needed to walk and bend more efficiently so as to better adapt to work in the fields and the mines. And most importantly, they would need more intelligence to be able to understand speech and commands, enough brain power to be useful, but not enough to compete with the gods. Enki would have known by this time, of course, about the seeding of life on Earth by Nibiru, as we discussed in the creation epic a few episodes back, with the exception of a few minor mutations, of course, as to be expected on two completely different planets. Because life on Earth was seeded by Nibiru, the chemistry of life was basically the same on both planets. The genetic codes of the two planets were very compatible with one another. So Homo erectus was basically a cousin of the Anunnaki, just a less evolved one. Understandably, the Anunnaki were in a time crunch. They didn't have the time to mess with a long and involved process of breeding and selection. They needed a quick fix, something that would allow for mass production of these new workers. And that process, as our scientists today are well aware of, was genetic manipulation. If you're having trouble grasping this, just think of what we humans have done with dogs. All canine breeds on Earth are the descendants of wolves. Through years of genetic manipulation, we Earthlings have created everything from the powerful Doberman all the way down to those damn little ankle-biting Chihuahuas and everything in between. All from the manipulation of wolf DNA. And we could do the exact same thing with human DNA if there weren't laws that prohibit it. DNA is DNA. If you know, you know.
Now I know!
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
Since the Anunnaki were even more advanced then than we are now, it's easy to understand that they had the ability and the knowledge to perform cloning, cell fusion, genetic transplants, or even other methods as yet unknown to us. Yes, the Anunnaki, and especially Enki, knew all about this process.
I know everything about this stuff.
In fact, Enki was rather accomplished in the science of genetics. Very accomplished. Remember our pesky little laws I mentioned a few moments ago, preventing certain DNA manipulation procedures and cloning? Yeah, Enki didn't have to worry about that. As the third most powerful Anunnaki and the son of Anu, he could do pretty much anything he wanted. And he did. As the years went by, Enki created all sorts of creatures here on Earth. Many of these beasts would shock you because they're things that we have all read about in legends and myths.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
But that is a subject for another show. And yes, Enki was more than capable of creating humans by manipulating Anunnaki DNA with that of Homo erectus. Now, I don't want to mislead you. This process was time-consuming. But it was much quicker than the process of breeding, as I said before. It was a system of trial and error. Enki and Ninhursag created many variations that simply did not work. Mr. Sitchin goes into many of these in the book, so I would check that out if you're interested. But it took some time to create the perfect worker, the first human, the Adamu. And this being was so comparable to the Anunnaki that one Sumerian text even mentions that Ninhursag gave him skin as of a god, a smoothless, hairless body. Now, I know what you're all thinking right now. I can just hear you. So, does that mean that if a person that has more body hair, that he's more Homo erectus, and likewise, if he has less body hair, he's more Anunnaki? And that would seriously be a logical assumption. But no, nothing could be further from the truth. There is a reason why we all look different depending on our cultural background. Hair color, skin color, more body hair, less body hair. There is a reason for all of that, and you're not going to like that truth either, but that too is a story for another time. And that is where I will leave you for this episode. You have quite a lot to digest there. And we have so much more to cover and learn. I'm Mad Mark, and I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed this episode. If so, please like, share, and comment. It really does help so much. And also tell your friends and help spread the word about this show. It appears that my show is going to be bi-weekly. That is, I will post a new episode every other Saturday. It takes me almost an entire week to write each episode, and since I'm doing all the work myself, I'm not able to create my own slave laborers as the Anunnaki did. I then have to record it, edit it, promote it, post it. Well, it's a lot of work for just one person, but that's okay. I give you a lot of information in each episode, and for many of you, this is all new information, and it's a lot to digest, I know. So posting a new episode every other week gives you time to think about and come to grips with what I've told you before I hit you with the next blast. And I'm always here if you have any questions. You can message me through madmarktv.com or on any of my social media platforms. I also wish to remind everyone that listening to this podcast is no excuse to not read the book that we're discussing here, The 12th Planet by Zecharia Sitchin. It is an amazing work, and I'm leaving out a lot of information in order to keep the podcast flowing properly. So do yourselves a favor and read that book. Today we have taken another step on our ongoing journey to find the truth. I promise you that things will get more and more interesting the further we delve into this topic of who are the aliens, the history of the Anunnaki on planet Earth. This has been Who Are the Aliens? The History of the Anunnaki on Planet Earth with your host, Mad Mark. Join us again on our next program when Mad Mark will once again uncover the answers to more of the mysteries that puzzle mankind.